really replace Deebo. I think he's one of the most unique players in the NFL. We're just gonna have to build our offense a little bit differently because we won't have that available to us. But Deebo's a hell of a football player. I've loved being his teammate. I've loved sharing the field with him. I love going to war with him. If that is what happens and he is traded, I'll be very sad.
Brew, you worried that your Niners are going in the wrong direction?
No, not at all. I mean,
Really?
look, there were a few years ago, I thought Deebo was the best football player in the league. And I thought A.J.
2021 is the year you're talking about.
Yeah, I thought A.J. Brown was like a poor man's Deebo. Now their relationship obviously is pretty much reversed. But Deebo now, no. I mean, last few years he hasn't been great. Obviously injuries kind of have taken their toll on him. Last year he rushed for like 136 yards, so they'll be fine without Deebo. And they got, if they're healthy, Ayuk back, obviously Kittle. I think Ricky Pearsall, health again, but I liked what I saw from him. Jawan Jennings is back, who is a great number 3 receiver, if that's what he ends up being. And then their running game, you hope it's McCaffrey, but it's going to be productive as long as there's like a decent back in there, it looks like, with Jordan Mason and Guerrero ran for big yards. So the thing to me is they got to be healthy. And if they are, I think they'll be back in the mix.
So here would be my concern, Coach, because Brew's right. Deebo Samuel wasn't that productive last year, and neither was the team. The offense wasn't that good. I think that with Kyle's offense, the ability to have all of these guys who are interchangeable pieces, like Kyle Juszczyk can catch passes, and Kittles can block great, and Deebo can do, you line them up anywhere, made them so difficult to defend. Deebo was, along with Christian McCaffrey, the most fungible of those chess pieces. Now we're talking about an older McCaffrey coming off an injury, Deebo being gone, then all of a sudden it's just more of a traditional offense, and that to me would be concerning.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a fallacy that guys are irreplaceable, and teams are filled with talented players that people said couldn't replace somebody else there, and that's just the reality of where we are. Someone may be unhappy and may want to trade, and you may have to move on from them or make salary cap decisions. I think the one thing that San Francisco's shown a consistent ability to do is to not only find players, but also be aggressive in free agency and go out and get pieces that work really well in this offense. And it's unfortunate that Deebo's at the place that he's at, both in terms of his relationship with the 49ers and his production. But the idea that he's irreplaceable, I don't think so. And I think that they'll do another good job of finding some other pieces and then use them creatively. Like, I respect Kyle's ability to use guys in a creative way and maximize some abilities that I think a lot of offensive coordinators would have never taken the chance on.
Yeah, I don't think they're going in the wrong direction. I think this is where their team was headed. When I look at Deebo, I'm not even so much of the thought that it was Kyle Shanahan not using him in the fashion of what we once saw him being utilized, more than it was Deebo Samuel not really wanting to play that role any longer.
Exactly. I agree with that.
I think that was probably more of what it was. And so if he's just going to be a traditional receiver, well then, yeah, you can let him go. Because
he didn't want to have the lifespan of a running back,
exactly,
or paid like a running back.
Absolutely.
So you want to be used
the value of Deebo Samuel is what you talked about, the football player of him, where you can line him up anywhere, and you have Christian McCaffrey, who you can do the same thing, and they're interchangeable, and you have a mismatch somewhere on the field. And so if he's not wanting to do that any longer, then you got to move on.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. As guys get paid more, they become more risk adverse, which makes total sense because you want to see the high end of your contracts. And when you're taking those extra hits and putting yourself in vulnerable spots, it doesn't make a lot of sense from a career perspective.
Also, we knew this was coming the moment they gave Ayuk that deal.
Right.
When you spend your first pick on Pearsall, you sign Jawan Jennings the offseason before, and then you pay Ayuk. We all said remember at last year's draft, they evidently called around the league like, who do you want to trade for, Deebo or Ayuk, remember? And so when they paid Ayuk, we knew this was coming. I'm really curious what the market will be for Deebo.
Yeah, well, I don't feel like talking about the market for Deebo. Listen, I don't think the 49ers are going in the wrong direction. And this whole idea of, oh, well, Deebo wasn't getting going, and so the offense wasn't getting going, that's a bunch of nonsense. That's disingenuous. This team was dealing with so many injuries, and everyone kept going in and out of the lineup, and the defense was a mess, and special teams was a mess. I think it was brutal for Shanahan to try to game plan and put guys in a position to succeed when you never knew who was actually going to be in the lineup. It's just too hard to run an offense that way when you have no consistency. And yet they still would have won games if their special teams didn't fail them and if their defense didn't fail them. They still could have, found themselves into in the playoffs, actually. So I just don't think it's I just don't think it's fair to kind of put that all on Shanahan, on Deebo, and etc. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts for the 49ers. It really was. And that's okay. That happens sometimes. It's okay. It doesn't have to be an indictment on Brock Purdy and an indictment on Shanahan. And no. And they're going in a great direction. I love what they're going to be doing defensively. I think their defense is going to get significantly better. As long as they don't get injuries, which again, you can obviously never predict, they should be more stabilized back on the offense. And that's really going to help them. And I think Brock Purdy will also be the type of quarterback that will thrive way more in a situation that allows the defense to dictate their offense. That you're still going to have these awesome and exciting and really innovative, dynamic plays and drives, but calling on Brock Purdy to be a hero game after game. Listen, it doesn't work for pretty much any quarterback, but it does feel like, because I always talk about this, some quarterbacks can do it 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10, 5 out of 10, that it just is a whole spectrum. That is not where Brock Purdy's strengths lie. That I think that Brock Purdy, and again, people take this the wrong way, but he's an elite game manager, an elite, I shouldn't say elite, special, because he has to do it more to really kind of get to that level. But he's a great, let's just say great right now. Let's not get too lost in the weeds with saying great or elite. But his brand of special, I'll say, whether you want to put it as great or elite, is being a game manager and executing the offense at an incredibly high level, which is incredibly necessary. It matters massively. And yet he can still be a special playmaker from the pocket. But it all has to be balanced. If you're constantly putting pressure on Brock Purdy with a banged up roster and a bad defense, he's not going to be able to put this team on his back. That's just not the type of quarterback that he is. But again, there's like 2 of those quarterbacks in the NFL. And quite frankly, they're not necessarily succeeding, week after week after week either. So I think when they can get their defense back to form, get healthy offensively, and have some stability in terms of like who the heck is in the lineup, that is going to calm everything else down and allow Brock Purdy to get to work. He's an awesome distributor and executor of the offense. He does exactly what Shanahan wants him to do. He is the extension of Shanahan. And when you have him do that, when you have him on script, the dude, that's his brand of special. He does it at an incredibly high level. We've seen it. And there's a difference between him. Oh, well, he just needs great players and a great coach around him for him to succeed. That's not always the case, because when he has those pieces around him, he can execute that offense nearly flawlessly and still be special, still be a great playmaker. Not all quarterbacks can do that. They just simply cannot. So that's where I think, this team, more than, sometimes I look at teams like this and, we try to put teams in boxes, and it's not always so easy to do so. And we can just look at the Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs as perfect examples of this. I think that for the Philadelphia Eagles to truly be special, they need to be healthy, right? That if they're missing an A.J. Brown or Saquon or whatever, they're just not going to be able to be as resilient as, say, the Kansas City Chiefs team. Now, I think the Philadelphia Eagles were the better team, and they proved that. But the Kansas City Chiefs were able to be more resilient. They were able to deal with all of their injuries and still win and still play high-level football, consistently. That's where they were able to shine. I do not think that the Eagles necessarily had that ability, but yet I still think that the Philadelphia Eagles were the better team. And again, look no further than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game for the Philadelphia Eagles against them. Like, they got blown out. And it was just like, this team needs its weapons. They're not going to be able to grind by all banged up and win games like the Kansas City Chiefs can. And that's very much because of Mahomes and Andy and the defense especially, where the defense needs to be able to make it possible to win in an ugly way. And with the 49ers and Brock Purdy and Shanahan, this is very much a team that needs all the pieces together for them to truly thrive. And the reality is that when you have all the pieces together, they're significantly greater than the sum of their parts because of Purdy's high-level execution, because of Shanahan's ability that once he knows who the heck is in his offense to be able to do what he needs to do. And I think also Shanahan's offense is much better suited when you have a better defense as well. Listen, most offenses are going to be that way, but not always. Not always. Joe Burrow and the Bengals don't need that. Now, granted they lose their games, but their offense doesn't need to be dictated based on how good the defense is. That offense will still be high-powered no matter what the score is. Now, again, obviously you need the defense to still be able to stop, otherwise you're not going to win games, but the offense isn't dictated by that. The Eagles' offense was very much dictated by their defense. For them to be able to play how they wanted to play, they needed their defense to be special. They needed their defense to do what needed to be done. And I think there's a lot of similarities of that with the 49ers as well. And again, it's not to say that that's the only way they can win. There's always the exception. It's not to say that they can't come from behind or this, that. That's not what I'm saying either. But I think when you get all the pieces together for the 49ers, ultimately you get a sum greater than its parts, which is what you saw exactly with the Philadelphia Eagles. You did not see that with the Kansas City Chiefs. You did not see that with the Buffalo Bills, the Baltimore Ravens, etc., etc., etc. So, and sometimes the name of the game is resilience. Sometimes, and that's how the Kansas City Chiefs have won. Sometimes the name of the game is to not be greater than the sum of your parts. That you can win just by outlasting everyone else and just playing really consistent football. But again, for the most part, you really need a special defense to be able to do that. And so, that's where I think the 49ers lie. And I think that's who the 49ers have been really in this whole Shanahan offense. But people confuse it though, where they're like, oh, well, this team's only great when you got the weapons, or Purdy's only great when you have all the Avengers. And it's like, you're kind of missing the point of what makes this team special. Because there's plenty of other teams that can have all these great weapons. And sure, the quarterback will look better and the team will be better, but it won't look like this. It'll be 1 + 1 = 2. But when the 49ers do it, it's 1 + 1 = 22. And that matters. That matters. And that's a credit to Shanahan and Brock Purdy. It just is. And I think, they kind of don't get that credit. But because of the way how this is all run, it makes them a little less resilient. And I think that's okay. The Kansas City Chiefs were arguably the most resilient team in the NFL. It got them to a Super Bowl, didn't get them a win. The Eagles were not probably a top resilient team when they were all healthy and ready to go. 95 points in the final 2 games. Boom, Super Bowl. So it's not necessarily like an either or. One is necessarily better than the other. It just kind of, honestly, in a lot of ways, it just kind of matters in terms of like, well, how are all the rest of the teams playing? Do you need the sum greater than your parts to win? Or do you just need to be able to, be resilient and outlast? And that's the difference. If the Philadelphia Eagles didn't make the Super Bowl and the Kansas City Chiefs were playing the Commanders or the Lions, their brand of football very much could have won. It absolutely could not against the Philadelphia Eagles, as we learned. So it just is what it is. And this idea of that the 49ers are going in the wrong direction, again, this is where you trust a highly run franchise. the 49ers have consistently been a highly run franchise. They're not always going to be able to win or go to Super Bowls. Just not going to happen. Every single year isn't going to be better than the last, or just as great as the last. You're going to have some down years. You're going to have some injuries. You're going to still make some wrong decisions. Even no matter how well run you are. You're going to draft the wrong player. You're going to sign the wrong player. You're going to have a tough contract. It's just going to happen. But for the most part, a team like the 49ers is always going to be going in the right direction, even if there seems to be a detour here or there. When we talk about teams going in the wrong direction, that's the Panthers. That's the Giants. That's the Cowboys. I mean, like, that's teams that were just like, you continue to get further and further away from where you're trying to go. The Philadelphia Eagles from 22 to 23, they didn't go in the wrong direction, but they didn't go in the right direction either. Which, again, it's a different thing. Then they adapted. They made multiple decisions. Then they made clear steps in the right direction. Super Bowl. So, yeah, just a little bit more of a nuanced way to look at it from, my perspective. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the 49ers? Do you think they're going in the wrong direction? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here, and I absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're on our way to doing it. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.